podcast Record Club, where each week one of us recommends an album for everyone to listen to, and then we fucking review it. This week, we're talking about my recommended record, which is Linkin Park's Meteora. Now, I know what you're all thinking, and I mean the audience, not my co-hosts here.
You do
and
not
that
know
is
what I'm thinking.
why...
You do not know what I'm thinking, don't worry.
Okay. Well, now I am worried. I wouldn't have thought to worry until you told me not to, and now I'm worried.
Okay.
But you may be asking yourself. Yourself, Jake, why in the fuck did you decide to pick Linkin Park's Meteora for a record club? And it's a confluence of things because
we like to punch up here on the Jams and Tea podcast. Punch up Jams and Tea, that's what they call us.
Yeah, the esteemed they. But that's the thing, is that there's many different reasons we can recommend an album here. Like, for example, I recommended the Toby Mac album. It's not because I liked that album or thought it was good. It was just because it provided good discussion. And it's not exactly the same thing, just because I think I speak for the three of us when I say that there's definitely going to be more affection displayed in this particular review. But I mainly picked Meteora because I think that Linkin Park as a band, where they stand in the greater musical and cultural context, is an interesting thing to look at and to analyze, especially their earlier work, and especially an album like Meteora, which is when they had a little bit more cred as being a little bit more of a legit music act, just because the public perception of Linkin Park is that kind of post-hybrid theory, they kind of sold out. And in my opinion, at least, that's not a fair designation. I think they just pursued other musical avenues that were distinctly less successful than what they had already done, and it had been chalked up to selling out, and it just wasn't as good or successful and just didn't play to the band's strengths. That said, I picked something like this over something like Hybrid Theory because I deem Meteora to be the better album, the more consistent album, and the album that is talked about considerably less, because Hybrid Theory is like the Linkin Park album. Everybody talks about that and has the really popular singles off of it. But if we're going to analyze them, I want to find the album that is the most emblematic of them, the most thing I have the most to say about, and the thing I have the most history with. That, of course, being Meteora. And earlier this year, we covered an album. We covered 1X by 3 Days Grace, which was sort of the, post-grunge trash classic, as we were, very kind to that album, but an endearingly kind of put downy way, is that it's not a good album, but we still possess a strange fondness for it. Whereas this is in that same vein, but has a lot more credibility and substance that you can sort of look at and tackle, in my opinion. So I had never really said this, but I think that, personally speaking, I do kind of have Linkin Park to thank to be the first band I ever paid any attention to in the terms of bands that I like, because I would just listen to music as I heard it on the radio. And then once I got an iPod and I could actually put songs on it, the first band I went to find multiple songs from was, in fact, Linkin Park, just because of their commercial omnipresence in the cultural sphere. At the time, they were just a really popular and relevant band. And this is sort of this is a little...
Pardon the interruption, but was it at least in part due to their songs on the Transformers movies?
Oh, 110% it was. Absolutely. Because Meteora was before this interest was latent. This is 2003. So this is right in the apex of post-grunge. And I think it was Hybrid Theory. Did that have a song on it that was in Transformers, or was it on the album after that?
Well, this is the album after Hybrid Theory. And
bad. The album after Meteora, then. Minutes to Midnight, is that what it is? Okay, yes. That's what I was trying to get for. I think we should go and sort of have a round table of our history with Linkin Park as a band, just because there is a lot to say about them. We should sort of get the preliminary out of the way, because I know I'm not the only one who has an interest in them. It was still before I was listening to albums as a whole, but it was just sort of back when it was the first band I ever pursued any particular interest in, just because I had heard lots of singles on the radio and the singles from Transformers. So I was like, hey, what the fuck do I do with this? And then I listened to a lot of songs. So what about you, Tyler? What's your history with Linkin Park?
I mean, it is surprisingly brief in the sense that I managed to avoid Linkin Park as a cultural phenomenon, just a little bit too young to have really like been cognizant of it when it was happening. And then by the time I was, it's no interest whatsoever. Knew the two big hits in the end and Numb, just knew them through cultural osmosis. Didn't really have passionate feelings on either. Thought they were both kind of really, really cheesy. Deliberately kind of put off listening to Hybrid Theory or Meteora. No real interest in it whatsoever. If you hadn't done this, I don't know when/if I would have ever gotten around to it. What's interesting actually is because Hybrid Theory is the record that has, I would say, considerably larger cultural cachet, and just like the record that people immediately come to, that's the record that people give all the kind of like retrospective, was this actually good? Like maybe we were really hard on this sort of record. That's the record that's had the kind of cultural reevaluation. It's the record that's culturally most important because it's their one that they blew up with. So I think if you hadn't done this, I would have eventually listened to that and probably never listened to this. What's interesting about that is I made a point of listening to both this week. So I just had the full context going into this. Hybrid Theory, I thought was really, really, it was decent. It was better than I expected it to be, and I expected to kind of slightly hate it, but I instead ended up slightly liking it. I didn't give any song lower than a 6, I don't think, but I gave a lot of songs a 6. So I was kind of just like, yeah, these are fine sort of, like slices of, new metal that I can, that are reasonably inoffensive, and as far as that genre goes, comparatively somewhat more tasteful than what you typically experience. I think the other thing that sort of benefits Linkin Park, generally from the outset, is that all their records are reasonably brief. Like they're not a band that, at least within the general albums that I'm aware of, and like just general in their songwriting. Again, I haven't dug really into the dire work beyond this. Seem to be a band that have avoided pointless bloat and excess and have kind of just come along and done their thing and dipped. That said, and I don't know whether this will be surprising to any of our viewers or not. I don't really know much about the perception of me than I think I do. I legitimately, without a hint of irony or but, think this is a great album. Like just without needing to qualify that. I don't think it's great for a new metal record. I don't think it's great for a rap rock record. I don't think it's great for this particular somewhat dated era of music. I just think this album's great. And no one is more surprised that I think this than me. Because I especially like even after listening to Hybrid Theory, I was like, okay, yeah, I like this, I guess, about as a little bit more than I expected to, about as much as I could have hoped to. So I did not have high expectations for this, frankly. And what's interesting about it is that it's not even necessarily really that it's a refinement in any way or an advancement in any way. Like it's very much of a piece with that album. It's just that the riffs are better, the songs are more compelling, the emotions broadly feel generally more earned and earnest. There's still some pretty crappy lyricism on it, that said. Like it's not exactly high art from that perspective, but it's sold with a kind of charisma and character and sort of genuine feltness that overcomes a lot of that. To the extent that I don't necessarily notice a lot of the worst lyricism unless I'm really trying to study this album, like attentively listen to it, which is not the way that anyone listens to fucking Linkin Park's Meteora. You just put it on and vibe and enjoy the riffs and enjoy the vocal performances, which, again, have that sort of cheesy kind of quality that, is just a given with this band. And I think it's at its most bearable here. But really, aside from the caveat that obviously the lyricism isn't going to win a Pulitzer, and the vocal performances aren't exactly, you know, fucking Adele or whatever, with those caveats, everything else on this record is superb. I think from front to back, I think you know, discounting the foreword of what it for that which is there for whatever reason, but is only 10 seconds long, so who cares? Discounting that, I don't think the record has anything that remotely approaches a miss. All the songs on this record are between sort of 7s and 9s as I rate them, but the vast majority are like strong 8s. Just really solid, fundamentally good songs. Benefits from being really tight construction wise. Each track feels like it has a new exciting sort of riff or development. Nothing terribly ambitious, nothing that's going to make you think, wow, okay. But within this niche, and sort of just as a fundamentals rock record with its own sort of flair and character, I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really strong. It's very easy to listen to from front to back. It is 36 minutes, which is an absolute chef's kiss blessing, because I feel like if it were any longer, it would start to drag. And that said, like, there are songs on the record that I enjoy sort of less than other songs. Like, I don't particularly get as much out of songs like Easier to Run or Figure 09 or From the Inside, but they're still quite good. Like, they're still pretty decent. Like, they're still, you know, more than just good. They're fine. But
I think you might have reversed that a little bit.
Sorry.
You might want to say more than fine. They're good.
Yeah. Like, I enjoy those songs.
Log.
But when they're
good.
When they are the low point of this record, and I still enjoy them quite a bit, it says something about the general quality of this record, which is that it is very consistent. I particularly think that the opening run of songs from Don't Stay to Hit the Floor is stellar, fantastic. It feels like the most accomplished sequence of music this band ever did, that I'm aware of anyway, unless there's some amazing hidden gem sequence in one of their later records, which I highly doubt. But even in terms of,
I'm sure someone will tell you there is.
Yeah, in terms of like even significance, I think you have to take that into account, and these songs are brilliant. Don't Stay, I particularly love. Somewhere I Belong is obviously one of their classic singles, really holds up. I did vaguely recognize it when I first heard this record, but it still felt like it had its own impact independent of that. And Hit the Floor just has the coolest riff of the record. I just think that song is really hard, and enjoy the shit out of that. Sort of,
and Chester's best vocal performance, I think.
And that's the thing. I think Chester, for the things I've said about some of the lyrical limitations and, you know, some of the cheesy approaches to vocals at certain points, I think that for the most part, Chester sounds really good on this record, in terms of being in his mode and what he does. What really like won me around on this record was the fact that I didn't feel this album flagged in the second half, which I was all but certain it would after that opening run. But actually, I feel like the second half is just as strong as the first half of the record. Like the songs I like somewhat less are relatively equally spread, so it doesn't matter. But the second half, I had some really sort of great deep cut songs that I enjoy, like Faint. I really, really dig. Breaking the Habit, obviously, I think is one of their most beloved songs, and for good reason too. It's the most emotionally potent song on this album that I can't take away from. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Nobody's Listening for its weird sort of, what is the instrument that it's built around? Is it flute or... I can't remember.
It's a woodwind of some variety, and frankly,
I think maybe a pan flute.
A pan flute, yeah.
Yeah,
it sounds.
Nobody's Listening is so fucking hard. Like it is so based. I had never heard that song up until I listened to this a couple of months ago because I knew I wanted to recommend it here. But holy shit, that beat on this song is so good.
You know what?
I love it.
You know what's going to trigger you too is that on Rate Your Music, the two lowest rated songs on this album are Nobody's Listening and Hit the Floor. Like that's crazy.
What the fuck? No.
It makes no sense. And it's stupid and bad.
Okay, look, here's why that's bullshit, is that I didn't really say what my like actual feelings are on the album here, but I actually do broadly agree with Tyler in that I don't really think this has a single miss on it. I pretty much, and I even like some of the songs he didn't like. I would extend the opening run to Easier to Run just because I find that song very lyrically compelling. But as you said, the riffs on shit like Hit the Floor are unspeakably fucking hard to this day. Like, yeah, is there music that's technically speaking focused on hitting harder, but with the ferocity of the guitar playing, which is just absolutely astonishing throughout the entire album, I can't overstate what a great, compelling presence Chester always is. And yeah, he's not gonna win an award exactly for lyricism, but frankly, it's the emotional honesty with which he delivers everything. And I think his lyrics are compelling in and of themselves. For me, honestly, the only foot wrong this album puts, and I hate saying this because he, by all accounts, seems like a very, very swell dude, but the only thing keeping this album from me saying that I like am fully in love with it is in fact Mike Shinoda. God, he's just not that great. Like, I don't know if maybe my standards are just a little bit too high here, but the reason I think Nobody's Listening is outstanding is not just because of the beat. I genuinely think he is commanding on that fucking song. And frankly, no other point on the album does he rise to the occasion like he does on that part. Like, not even just in the sense that I don't really think he's a compelling performer. Like, it's a lot of his flows are really like stilted and kind of awkward, but like his actual lyricism, like, Chester's isn't like amazing, but it always feels real. It feels raw, Whereas Mike's is just kind of like sometimes just kind of tacky. It's just kind of like, I don't really think that this made the song necessarily a whole lot better. I don't know if it made it worse, but I feel like a lot of his contributions just tend to not make the song any more favorable, technically speaking, which is why Nobody's Listening sticks out to me. Is that like, it's not exactly like a hugely emotional performance or anything. It's just that like, it's one of the songs on here that goes for the actual emotional catharsis they talk about with translating the emotional angst that they feel into music, which is some of the stuff that I really like on here. Is that there is stuff that's like explicitly the way that making music like this helps them, which complements the sort of core theme of this sort of what Chester sort of expresses. Is that this is, like, a lot of it gets shit talked for being like melodramatic and overwrought and stuff. And I can't really fault that particular accusation against albums like this, but at the same time, it just feels very real. I know that stuff like Numb is memey and people make fun of it and think it's uncool, and like, I get it, but also I listen to that song and I'm just like, nah, there's lyrics on here that just really do genuinely strike a real chord with me. And it's not just because of the unfortunate untimely context of Chester's death. It's just that, like, as a kid, I didn't listen to the darker Linkin Park songs. I listened to the radio hits that were a little bit more like upbeat and a little bit harder. But songs like Numb and Breaking the Habit, I listen to now, and I'm just like, I kind of feel bad that these songs are so clowned on, just because they get at something really honest about suicidal tendencies, and the sort of demographic of this music is, Tyler talked about in the 3 Days Grace album, that it's like music that keeps you from doing something stupid sometimes. And I feel like the writing here is just so much better than that record, just a lot better.
And I mean, if we're to think about why, I mean, that this record works in that respect, and the 3 Days Grace record doesn't, is I think a lot of what you're saying, the sense of a sort of genuineness in it, even through its corniness. Like with the 3 Days Grace record, it felt like every lyric was a kind of platitude that didn't really have a basis in any kind of clear, tangible emotional state. Like, it all just felt very artificial. Whereas I think Chester is such a powerful performer, and I don't share necessarily the distaste for Mike Shinoda, although I will say, my patience is limited, which is why it's good that this record is the length that it is.
Short.
But I do think there's a genuine pathos here. The thing is, like Numb is my favorite song on this album. I think it is.
It's a great song.
Frankly, I think it might be my favorite Linkin Park song. And it never really hit me how much I liked it until I heard it here in the context of this record, where it is incidentally fantastically placed as a closer. Like I can't think of other examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are more examples of like a great, a huge single being like the closing track of an album, and that whole like adding a completely different dimension to it. But it really does here. Like it feels like this, it has this utter finality to it, especially when you've contextualized the numbness that, you know, is sung of here with songs like Breaking the Habit and Somewhere I Belong and all those songs earlier in the record as well. And also I think the way the song kind of is built from the songs that precede it, I think that session, the instrumental, is really sort of really strong for an instrumental. Like I really love.
I would not take it out. It's great.
Absolutely not. I consider it one of the instrumental highlights of the album, and I think it's really fantastic. And again, it's just testament to how well paced and sequenced and, you know, constructed this album is, that a song like that would be an absolute standout. Not a detriment to the other songs either, but I really enjoy it for a lot of reasons. And so yeah, but Numb itself just really hits now. And I don't know, for people who find that song unbearably cloying, there's no way, I guess, for me to appeal to them and explain why it works for me. But it just really does. I listen to it and it just really hits in a particular way that very few bands in this niche are able to get at. Certainly not fucking 3 Days of Grace, if we're to even consider them. Like they're more post-grunge than nu metal, I guess. But you know, if we're to consider the world that this music inhabits, the cultural place in the early 2000s that all this music inhabits, there's just a genuine toughness in Linkin Park here and in some of these songs that I feel has gotten lost, maybe in what they've gone on to do subsequently, maybe in just the saturation of this kind of music and all of the kind of poor imitators or just less talented people executing it, and just the tackiness that this era is sort of preceded with. I've no doubt that within the next 10 years, there will be, just because of the way that time works and the way that music culture works, I am almost certain there'll be like a serious reevaluation / revival of early 2000s nu metal. And when that happens, we can say we were there ahead of the curve with this album, at least, maybe not very many others. But still, I think that it's maybe easy to overlook, but this record has a lot of power and just effect in it that I was not expecting to experience, and makes it sort of genuinely quite satisfying. And I don't think I would have thought this years ago either. I think I would have still been too above this like 5 years ago. But now I've kind of grown up a bit enough to realize that that's stupid and that I really enjoy this for what it is. And I'm glad that I was able to see this light in such an unexpected way. Although I will say, just as a fucking aside, that this entire week I've been saying this album as Meteora, as in like the presence of a butcher. So yeah, that means nothing, but yeah.
Well, you know, I don't, this could probably be contested, but a couple things is that one, for the people who find it like unbearably cloying and stuff, it's just like, you know, you can't argue that makes them change their mind on that. It's like, well, congratulations. If you think that way about this, you think the way that like 90% of most normal people do. So kudos, whatever. But so like, you know, fucking, we didn't just review this to like fucking rag on it. So that's why I'm glad we had a more broad range of emotion attached to it, at least. And for me anyway, I don't even really know if I would consider this album specifically to really be all that in keeping with nu metal. One of the surprising things about Linkin Park is that if you read up on them and read what their musical influences were, it's surprisingly diverse. And when I listened to it, especially this go around, I sort of saw the Matrix, as it were. I think the biggest incorporation that surprised me the most, and I could be fucking insane here, but I think just because of the whole like rock fusion, that this isn't miles away from what was, you know, happening, or even some stuff that was really popular. Or even like, you know, I think Deftones did it in a similar way, is that I find so much influence from trip hop on this album that are integrated into these instrumentals all over the fucking place. I'm talking like straight up Portishead shit that's integrated into songs. Like, I mean, at the very, very beginning of stuff like Numb, you hear these sort of like distorted looping kind of parts that sort of incorporate themselves into the beat. And I'm just like, wow, this, like, Mike Shinoda as like a beatsmith in that respect, I do think is particularly strong. That's one of the things that he is very well known for, even to this day. Like, he's a dude who actually had like I saw an interview with him, and he had a project throughout quarantine to keep him from going insane. He wanted to keep making. It was just basically him live streaming himself making beats and stuff, and he's really, really fucking good at it. And you can tell that the diverse and broad instrumentals sort of like they feed into the influence, and I feel like they really show. And I feel like this is a better album than something like Hybrid Theory, because I feel that diversity being congealed into something that feels both more singular and more diverse sounding. Is that, for me, Hybrid Theory is a good album, but it doesn't hit the heights of something like this, because it doesn't quite, like, I feel, understand how to synthesize it in the same ways that Meteora does. And combined with the fact that I feel like the lyricism is so like honest and stuff, is that like a song like Numb, when I listened to it, I was just like, you know, this is an experience that this didn't even speak to when I was a kid. It's just like, this song is just about being in a fucking terrible, emotionally abusive relationship, and just sort of like taking on the form and like the negativity of somebody else being like manifested inside you, to the point where you like adopt their negativity, and it becomes cyclical, which is a fucking dark prospect that, unfortunately, like, I think the lyrics that hit me the most are honestly the ones that are the most like tangential to the song, which is the thing that always gets me choked up about this song is when he says become so tired, so much more aware. And I'm like, yeah, I remember feeling like that. It's a very specific feeling. I fucking hated it.
Yeah, that's a really good note. And I think something else that sort of maybe might have influenced my willingness to really get on board with this is I watched a great video from the YouTube channel Trash Theory a few months ago on Evanescence. And that video spoke, I learned through that video of the kind of, I've forgotten the name of the singer in that band. What's her name?
Amy Lee?
Amy, yeah, that's it. I learned through that video about the fact that, you know, when Evanescence were making their breakthrough record, I think during that period, or maybe before that period, Amy Lee was in a very abusive relationship. And a lot of the biggest Evanescence songs were, including the biggest Evanescence song, are specifically about that and about suffering in that relationship. And learning that just add, like, you know, I think there's so much, it's so easy to dismiss and memify a lot of these songs like Numb and like I can't even remember My Immortal, thank you.
I by the way genuinely think that is a devastating song. It's like genuinely difficult to listen to.
As do I. And I think my process of getting to that point was learning to sort of shut out the memification, which doesn't mean that like I don't necessarily appreciate good memification when it's done, and it doesn't necessarily mean that memification is insulting inherently. But
Wake me up.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm still going to do that, and I'm still going to do or think about the Linkin Park, the Numb meme with the dog barking to the melody of the song.
That's just funny. Yeah, it's entirely irrespective of the content of the song itself. It's just funny.
Yeah, I feel like Chester and Mike would think that was funny.
Yeah. Anyway, so that what that I guess prevented me from seeing and watching that Trash Theory video on Evanescence woke me up to was the fact that, hey, actually these are songs that are actually genuinely coming from quite a real and devastating emotional place that isn't just put on by these bands anyway. And so that really, I think, primed me to approach Linkin Park and approach this record more fairly. And I think the kind of lack of coolness and sort of tastelessness with which a lot of new metal is regarded really prevents a lot of people from approaching it in that way. And in a lot of senses really leads to some quite ugly elitism and even quite pretentious behavior with regard to the discussion of music from this era that, you know, I feel like you can hate a lot of it without being a fucking asshole about it. And yet a lot of people don't know how to do that.
There's also just Linkin Park albums that are so much more deserving of your ire than these two for so many other reasons. Like, there's no shortage of reasons that you can dislike something like this, but I feel like it's kind of omnipresent, like you're saying. And I feel like, Tyler, you will be thrilled to learn that I don't know if you've checked it, but I am always thinking about albums to recommend for this segment of the show. But very far down the line, sometime next year, we are in fact going to be reviewing Evanescence's Fallen. So
oh fuck yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
So that's something. And I want Morgan to talk because I know he has probably the most specifically storied history with this band as someone who like actually listened to them beyond me, who is just like, I listened to like 5 singles for like 10 years or whatever. Not 10 years, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I had never. So Linkin Park was basically the first band that I ever found outside of my parents, and it was the Transformers movie, the first one specifically.
Yep.
That played over the ending credits of that movie. I think I was 7 when that movie came out, and was just obsessed with that song. Funnily enough, I'm much more fond of New Divide, which was the song for Revenge of the Fallen by them.
Oh, totally better. Agree.
Both decent to really good songs, but I hadn't heard an album from them in full until I think senior year of high school, when I threw this on for whatever reason and realized I had heard like at least half of it already. The singles in particular hit a really strong nostalgic spot for me. Numb was in rotation like all the time in the same era that I was listening to stuff like 3 Days Grace's 1X. And as I was growing up, it had the unfortunate association with stuff like 1X and everything else I was into at that age, more or less, and I kind of shied away from it for a while. But at some point, something compelled me back to it, and so I found myself listening to this album all the way through for the first time, and just I liking pretty much everything on it. But at this point, I've heard this album in full probably 50 times. It's one of my go-to like albums that I put on when I just need something in the background. It's like just pure comfort food, I guess.
Yeah.
Because like as soon as the weird electronic opening of like Somewhere I Belong starts playing, I'm just immediately in a blanket of security of youth. And it's I love the music video for that song as well. It really plays at that feeling that I just described really well. But yeah, that's a fantastic song, probably my favorite one on here. Breaking the Habit also has an amazing animated music video. I do want to say on this note, I find it fascinating, and by fascinating I mean some semi-enraging, that something like Breaking the Habit and Numb are the subject of memification, when Hybrid Theory, the album that people like more, has songs like Crawling and One Step Closer, which are like so much more over the top and like not grounded in comparison to these songs.
Let's be real here. Breaking the Habit is a song about killing yourself. It's not a song about thinking about doing it. It's not a song about being depressed. It's a song about killing yourself because life hurts too much.
Yeah. And, Crawling is like, I think that song sucks, but you know,
it's not very good.
Can I say I like Crawling and One Step Closer both quite a bit against. So I'm just gonna put that out there for fun.
I'm not gonna say that you're invalid.
Yeah, I mean,
I definitely don't like them as much as most of the songs on this record, to be fair. But I like that. I do have a particular fondness for those first few songs on Hybrid Theory. Paper Cut is my favorite song on that record as well. But anyway,
yeah,
that's a good one. Yeah.
Those two, both of those songs have been memed to hell and back as well. I think part of that's just the sort of unification of the fact that everybody of a certain age has heard those songs because they were this band was fucking everywhere at one point. And that's part of it as well. And the fact that everybody who was on board for that got to a certain age and was like, wow, this is really over the top. But, you know, I think there's definitely a divide between the quality of the songwriting.
I do agree with you though. I think there is totally a difference in quality, regardless of how much you like the songs. I just think that these are undeniably better written songs.
Yeah, and there's certainly a youthful vibrance and brashness to stuff like One Step Closer that has an appeal. And you know, it's fun to when you're hanging out with your friends to go, and I'm about to break. You know, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah,
it's a similar feeling to a fucking. Although it's a much better song, it's a similar feeling to Limp Bizkit's Break Stuff.
Come on, we've got to review a Limp Bizkit album.
No, we do not.
It's just one of those days where you don't want to wake up. Everything is fucked. Everybody sucks.
Morgan said it was infuriating that songs like this are memed like that, and I think the part of the reason they are is because people have like accepted that they feel like they've probably heard people's imitations and memifications of this song more than the actual song itself, and therefore that's what makes it like funny to them. And then that's why when we go back to revisit something like this, that's why it's just like, oh wow, this is so much more potent than culture at large as like led me to believe that it is. And I think it's interesting that like that sort of perception can completely alter how you experience something that fundamentally remains exactly the same. And throughout, I think that's just true for everything here. And you know, I feel like if I didn't mention it, I mean, I alluded to it, but if I don't mention this, it's somewhat dishonest, is that I can't not listen to the early music of Linkin Park, especially without the added context of Chester. And it's not something that changes the music at all, just because if you think that it does change the music, then you're wrong and disrespectful, frankly. But what I think it just sort of like, I think I spoke on this a little bit as on what video was it? Temple of the Dog, when I talked about how I think like the cultural perception of the death of rock music, I think really had more to do with like Linkin Park than it did with anything in the grunge era, just because this band was really like the last moment that I think rock music truly had as like rock as we knew it instead of whatever it is now. And Chester had a big part in that. And I think that, I mean, he's one of the reasons this album is as good as it is because his writing is good and his performances are like, I think he's a phenomenal vocalist. I think like his like screaming never really like, it never broaches on being grating, but it's also, he is able to carry a sense of melody with it that a lot of performers just simply can't. But he's also got like that youth about him that makes him energetic. And a lot of these songs sort of have this kind of wiriness about them that feels like a little bit less straightforward than being then. And you know, he was an incredible fucking talent, and we shouldn't take him for granted just because a lot of his stuff has been like memified now. It's a shame. I think he deserves to be remembered for work that was great and meant a lot to a lot of people. I mean, go on the comment section of any fucking song on Meteora and you will find fucking story upon story upon story about how this helped teenage whoever, as opposed to the 3 Days Grace the lyric comment where somebody typed a manifesto.
That was on Genius. That was so funny.
I mean, My favorite part about that was that he listed what the song was about to him, and he just listed the lyrics like verbatim. It like wasn't about his interpretation. He just like, this song is about, and then he just listed the lyrics.
This song is about when you want to shoot your teacher.
Oh God, what?
Like, and I think that's the important thing that this video should, if you take nothing else from it, that even if it's still not your cup of tea, and it very well might not be, is that there is still a distinct difference between a Linkin Park and a 3 Days Grace or a Limp Bizkit, that, you know, they don't deserve to get necessarily lump each other in like the same maybe movement, sure, but in terms of quality, even if you don't vibe with this, I think it's undeniable that it's a step above its genre contemporaries.
I think I fully agree. I think that's probably the podcast stance. I think even if August were here, he'd probably share a similar sentiment, even if he doesn't enjoy the album as much as us, because it is just
Considering
so.
he gave a similar score to 3 Days Grace as we did, I feel like that sentiment would indeed be shared.
Yeah, it is the most sort of refined version of what this kind of music can be. And I guess maybe there are some people who enjoy this kind of music at its most sort of ridiculous and would go towards the opposite spectrum and would consider this maybe less interesting. But I think that from the perspective from which we approach this genre and this music, I mean, this is essentially a high watermark. And if this is a record that you have kind of dismissed offhand, or if you haven't listened to it in a long time, and you haven't really kind of considered it very much, we would obviously encourage going back to it and giving it a fresh set of ears. I think that, again, if I had heard this several years ago, I think I probably still wouldn't have thought very much of it. But coming at it, having grown a bit as a person, having diversified, I guess, my tastes in music, and sort of become more accepting of things that typically I wouldn't really think about all that much. The joys, well, joy not being the right word, but the charms and, I guess, special emotional sort of intensity of this album really connects, I think, in a way that not a lot of music in the Spain does. So yeah, that's, I think, a good way of sort of summing it up.
You need music like this for younger people. I mean, it's like when I said in the 3 Days Grace video, where it's just like, when I'm angry now, I put on fucking Calculating Infinity, and what fucking 12-year-old is going to get angry and want to listen to Calculating fucking Infinity? They need something digestible that they can under fucking stand, like this.
This is the arc of the music listener. You listen to Meteora when you're 15, you go nuts, you lose your mind. You get to 21, you've grown off of Linkin Park, you listen to Calculating Infinity to go nuts and lose your mind. And then eventually you get to 25 and you realize, you know, I was stupid for growing off of Linkin Park. And you go back to Meteora and you listen to it and you go nuts and you lose your mind. And that is the role, I think, that this band probably plays in a lot of millennial to older Gen Z people's lives, in the sense that you almost take it for granted if you're experiencing it when you're young, and then when you're subject to the vicious backlash against it and the kind of general sort of cultural perspective of, oh, well, we look down on this, and then you get pulled in by that. And then eventually you come back around to the point where you have enough distance from it now to really see what you loved in it in the first place, and to not be as embarrassed by those parts of yourself. Like when I was 21 or 20, I was really embarrassed by a lot of things that I enjoyed when I was 15, 16, because it made me think about the kind of person I was then, how much different I was. And I was trying to get as far away from that as possible and trying to grow up as much as possible. And then when you get to 24, 25, or just a few years later, it's like, actually, you want more than anything to rediscover the mindset you were at when you were 16, 15, because you're starting to miss it. And then at that point in your life is when Linkin Park's Meteora and all of the Linkin Park Meteoras of the world start to become more important than ever to you. And so I would say, if you have a record like that in your life, if you have a record that you used to love, but you haven't listened to in a long time, you've grown off, or became embarrassed by it, go back to it, give it another chance, whatever it is, and see if your relationship changes. Because I think if there's a lesson to be taken away from this whole conversation, it's that
stop giving a fuck.
Yeah, stop giving a fuck, I guess, and part of, I guess, being open to new music and being open to discovering things in the world is being open to recontextualizing and I guess changing your mind about things that you judged in the past. And that is one of the big sort of lessons I've learned with regard to art over the last few years. And yeah, I just made this Linkin Park video a whole lot more profound than it needed to be.
I was about to say, only we could take Linkin Park's Meteora and turn it into an essay on self-discovery and acceptance.
Well,
look, we are far from the first people to do this because, like I said, go check those comment sections of those videos and you'll probably leave teary-eyed just because, we do need music like this. We don't, not everything has to be fucking Radiohead, Like, you don't need to be fucking intellectually stimulated by fucking every single instrumental choice. Not everything has to be this utilitarian masterpiece. Sometimes you're 12 years old and you fucking... and you're angry in your room and you listen to something that makes you feel seen, and that's fine. That's a perfectly valid thing for art to be.
Hell yes. Anyhow, I would say to Morgan that we often do that, and I think that is one of the great strengths of our podcast is the fact that we do that, and probably something that I would hope people who watch us enjoy, or at least if they don't, they will have switched off by now anyway. Okay. Well, anything else anyone wants to add?
Well, I think it's also important that, we're talking about, it's good for music to be like this, but I think that we've accentuated that we all think that, you don't really need any added context. We just think this album is good. It's not good for a post-grunge nu metal album. No, it's genuinely just very good. It's very tight. Every song here is very good. A lot of them are well written. They're exceptionally performed. There's no caveat here. You can genuinely throw compliments at it.
Yeah. I said that when I led off as well, and absolutely 100%. We as a podcast can be trusted to give honest opinions that aren't qualified by, because we're not so insecure that we have to make it clear that, I only like this for this. We like shit or we don't like it. Anyway.
If anything, this podcast is fucking allergic to irony.
Well,
which
yes.
Is good. I'm sick of it. Please stop.
Yes. Which probably makes us a bit of a refreshing voice in terms of online music criticism.
I fucking hope so.
Anyway, let's not dig any deeper inside our own assholes and talk about our favorite tracks.
Track by track analysis of Meteora. Let's go.
Track by track analysis of my fucking colon.
You're gonna have to put your camera up there really far, dude.
Yeah. So my I guess I'm going first. Why not? My three favorite tracks are Numb, Breaking the Habit, and Don't Stay. My least favorite track is From the Inside. And I'm giving the album a 7.5.
My three favorites are Somewhere I Belong, Breaking the Habit, and I'll say Hit the Floor. Least favorite probably From the Inside, but it's not any, it's not. It's a good song. And I will give this an 8.5.
Hell yes.
Right. My three favorite songs on here, I'm gonna go with I'm gonna shout out Easier to Run just because I find that song really emotionally compelling. But in addition to, I'll say Hit the Floor just because that shit is so fucking hard. And definitely my favorite song here will be Breaking the Habit. Least favorite song, hate to be repetitive, but I don't, From the Inside is one of the few songs that feels like it's kind of repeating material that the album is already otherwise done, but it's a good song still, so it's really not that bad. And I give the album a 7.5.
Okay, that's an average of 7.8. So I think hell yes to that. Good shit. Let's fucking go. The same average that we gave to the Tribe Called Quest Low End Theory and fucking a bunch of other presumably canonical records. So I think that speaks to
psychotic.
Yeah. Anyway, let
Look,
us
Tyler,
know.
you said this is going to get a reevaluation in the next decade or something. This
100%.
very well could be considered a canon classic.
100%. I definitely think that it's a matter of
Just
fucking
ahead of the
time.
curve.
It's a matter. I mean, it happened with MCR and their two
Yeah.
biggest records. Like I know, like when I first listened to that, the Black Parade, it had like a 3.36 on Rate Your Music, and now I think it's at like a 3.58 or something.
Yeah,
like it's
so
just
that's right.
astronomically risen. So I think that'll happen with some of these records as well. But yeah, let us know at home what you think of Linkin Park's Meteora. Is it your favorite Linkin Park record? Do you share our enthusiasm for it? What's your relationship like with Linkin Park, if you have one at all? And what's your history been like with them? Have you shared the experiences that we've had in terms of like discovering the joy of their music, or do you still think it's all absolute shite? Let us know. In any case, we don't, even if you disagree with us, we want to hear from you in the comments below. Make sure you check out our main episode from this week where we review the new albums from The War on Drugs and KO Dot. Also check out our other record clubs as well. Lots of videos happening. You can check them all out by hitting the channel up. Make sure you like and subscribe if you have not already. If you want to, it really makes a difference to us. You can support us by hitting the join button and spending a buck as well to help us out. Don't have to, of course, but if you want to, if you enjoy what we do, then we'd love it if you'd consider it. And we don't have a Thursday video this week. We're taking some time to not do Thursday videos every week, but we will have more content coming as well. So don't worry about that. There are special one-off videos that are in the pipeline from multiple members of this podcast. So there'll be plenty more stuff coming, and we'll be back next week with a new main episode and a new record club, which next week's record club is, well, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to save it because it's going to be a really, really special one. August.
We should say it's August.
Yeah. So
yeah,
stick around for that. And yeah, that leaves only one thing left to say. Rock over London, rock on Chicago, Transformers, more than meets the eye.